All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Like I said yesterday, when I previewed my top 25 for this upcoming college football season, things are right around the corner. We're a little bit less than a month away, and I am focused on talking about each conference individually as well as the college football playoff. And right now, I want to get things started today with the Big Ten and who has the best chance to win this conference. And of course, this is going to be the last year that the Big Ten is going to have the divisional format because with the arrival of USC and UCLA next year, the Big Ten, like a lot of other conferences, is going to ditch the divisional format and it's just going to be a 16 team free for all. I still think um, it's going to be a 9 game schedule. I hope that the Big Ten is going to do like the 3-3-6 format because, there are rivalries that we need to see every single year. When you think about Big Ten football, obviously, a lot of the focus has been on Michigan and Ohio State over the years, and for good reason. I mean, two of the most storied programs in the history of college football. But with that said, there are some other good games that take place every year. The Penn State Ohio State game, I think, has been very intriguing since the Nittany Lions joined the Big Ten back in 1993, and then of course, both of them being in the Big Ten East. Of course, the Michigan State battle. I think that is a contest that has, it's taken on a new feeling in recent years. You think about, under Mark D'Antonio, how Michigan State really changed the narrative of being, like a lot of people felt like they were Michigan's little brother. And Mark D'Antonio on his watch said it ain't going down like that. Um, you think about, Michigan, Minnesota for the little brown jug. You think about Iowa, Wisconsin, just to name a few. But nonetheless, I still think this is going to be a very intriguing season for Big Ten football. So, starting off in the East, I talked about Penn State in my top 25 yesterday. And of course, the Nittany Lions are still going to be a relevant team in the Big Ten this year. It's a bit of a rebuild because you have no more Sean Clifford at quarterback for Penn State, and he was the do it all guy in James Franklin's offense. So it's going to be interesting to see if it's going to be Drew Allard, Jackson Smolik, or Bo Prabula that get the nod week number one when Penn State takes the field. But regardless of who the quarterback is for Penn State, they still have plenty of talent there at the skill positions on offense. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen at running back. This to me is not one of the better running back duos in the Big Ten. I think they're one of the better running back duos in the nation. Plain and simple, no ifs, ands, or buts. And I think their athleticism will be on full display this year. Also, keep an eye out defensively for sophomore outside linebacker Abdul Carter. It's going to be a bit of a rebuild for Penn State, but I think with what we've seen under James Franklin, he doesn't get enough credit for what he has done with Penn State. He's won games. He's 78-36 there. He's only 49-30 in the Big Ten. But I know like he does have one Big Ten championship. But this is a guy who just led the Nittany Lions to a Rose Bowl win last year, but he tends to fly under the radar. Why? That's because especially in recent years, Penn State has struggled against Michigan and Ohio State. If not for those two losses last year, Penn State was a playoff team. They take care of their business against everybody else. And I think that is going to once again be the case this year. To me, I still think the Big Ten East is a two-team battle with Michigan and Ohio State. You look at Michigan, obviously they were rolling last year. They dominated Ohio State in that second half in Columbus to win, uh, beat Purdue in the Big Ten championship game. And then, to me, I'm not going to say they took TCU lightly in the Fiesta Bowl, but what I will say is this: by the time that Michigan got it going, they were playing catch up because they realized TCU was better than most people gave them credit for. But nonetheless, Michigan returns one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten in JJ McCarthy. And as much as we talk about things changing offensively throughout football, you look at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh, their head coach, is a disciple of the late great Bo Schembechler. And with that said, you win within the trenches. It's all about the offensive line and defensive line for Michigan. And offensively, Michigan is going to run the football. We saw what Donovan Edwards could do late in the season when he replaced the injured Blake Corum. Now you get Blake Corum back along with Donovan Edwards. Good luck stopping them. You got four seniors and a grad transfer on that offensive line for the Wolverines, and they're going to get off the bus each Saturday running the football. They're going to need more speed outside offensively in the passing game. They were 83rd in the nation last year in passing. And for Michigan to get where they expect to be, which is not just winning the Big Ten, but winning a national championship, they've got to get more from their passing game. Defensively, middle linebacker Junior Colson not only is a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year candidate, he's also a Butkus Award candidate, in my opinion. Free safety Rod Moore has a nose for the football. He's also going to be one of the better defenders in the Big Ten. Very favorable schedule for Michigan, but it's going to come down to what they can or cannot do in November. Traveling to Happy Valley to take on Penn State, and then, of course, finishing at home versus Ohio State. And I guarantee you the Buckeyes, they're going to be chomping at the bit for that contest, not taking anything away from Michigan. But we have seen Ohio State since Jim Tressel took over in the early 2000s. They really dominated the Michigan Ohio State rivalry. But in the last 2 years, Michigan has beaten them. So will the Wolverines be able to make it 3 years in a row? We got to wait and see. But speaking of those Buckeyes, like Michigan, they were so close to winning the national championship last year. And even though that head coach Ryan Day has some key players to replace, his team is still talented enough this year to do it all. You got to replace CJ Stroud at quarterback. And I think anybody, in my opinion, who doubted what CJ Stroud could do, just look at that fourth quarter of that Peach Bowl loss to Georgia. No Marvin Harrison out. The defense was getting worn down at that point. And, Ohio State was on the ropes, and CJ Stroud put that offense on his back and gave them an opportunity to win, even though they came up short. Now, more than likely, it's going to be Kyle McCord replacing CJ Stroud at quarterback, and he has a plethora of talent around him. I'm going to start with wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. I said this yesterday in my top 25. If Marvin Harrison Jr. was able to come out last year, he would have been a top 5 pick. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So definitely he's going to, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a top 5 pick in this spring's NFL draft. But if you want to focus on him, you still got to worry about Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming at wide receiver, because we've seen in recent years how deep the Ohio State program has been at the wide receiver position. Then you look at their running backs, so Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. Good luck stopping all of that talent. I talked about Tommy Eichenberg yesterday. He's another guy. He's going to be a Butkus Award candidate, in my opinion. And they have what it takes to not only finish in the top 10, but also potentially win the Big Ten. For me, their first game, September 2nd at Indiana, what's that going to look like from the standpoint that you're breaking in a new quarterback? And if you go back a couple of years, when Ryan Day broke in CJ Stroud at quarterback, his first game was on the road at Minnesota, a Friday night game, very hostile crowd, and Ohio State was able to pull it out. And from there, they had to set back at home against Oregon, a good Oregon team, and then from there, they really got it going. And I think this has the makings of that, in my opinion. For Ohio State, I talked about it yesterday. Going out of conference to take on Notre Dame in September is going to be big. Hosting Penn State at the end of October, and then, of course, finishing up on the road in Ann Arbor with Michigan. You look at it, Indiana's going to have a tough battle, an uphill battle in the Big Ten East, as is Rutgers. And, I've talked about this multiple times for Rutgers. Everybody knew what was going to happen. And I know Rutgers can try to put a good politically correct spin on it all they want. But at the end of the day, the Big Ten just wanted them for the media market. And all they've become is a homecoming game for everybody else. And they've struggled, especially in the last couple of years in the Big Ten East. Being that Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan are just light years above everybody else. And maybe just when the Big Ten ditches the divisional format, maybe Rutgers is going to have more of an opportunity. We got to wait and see, but it's not going to happen this year. You're talking about a Rutgers team that was 127th in the nation last year in offense. They have a big problem keeping the local kids there because they're going to the other Big Ten schools. There's plenty of talent, high school football wise, in New Jersey, but Rutgers cannot just tap into it, unfortunately. Indiana, like I said, they are going to be fighting an uphill battle. I think Michigan State will show some improvement after the disappointment last year, but they're still fighting an uphill battle in that division. They got to replace Peyton Thorne at quarterback. That was a shock to see him leave Michigan State and go to Auburn. You've got talent there for head coach Mel Tucker with running back Jalen Berger and then junior middle linebacker Cal Holiday. Michigan State, they've got to get better defensively. They've got to get better on offense as well. But it's going to be interesting to see how their season starts out. They host Washington on the 16th of September. And remember, that was a game last year when things began to unravel for the Spartans when they went to Seattle and lost to the Huskies. They're home for Maryland on September 23rd, and then they're home for Iowa. An Iowa team that should be better. So that right there could be telling for me as far as what Michigan State or how much they can improve this year. A team that could be scary good is Maryland. And I say that because Maryland is good enough, in my opinion, to take care of their business against the teams that they're supposed to beat. And they're more than capable of putting at least a scare in some of the contenders, especially if those teams have to travel to College Park, especially late in the season. But Mike Loxley has turned this into a respectable program in the Big Ten. They finished with a winning record in each of the last 2 years in the tough Big Ten East. And, they got talent there. You look at senior quarterback Talia Tagovailoa. I think he can have an impact, a positive impact for this team. You also look at sophomore running back Roman Hemby. You got three seniors in the offensive line. And I think this Maryland team is going to be very feisty all season long. You look at the West, and of course, the West has been a mad scramble in recent years because you have a whole bunch of teams over there that are basically on the same level, and it's just up to somebody, being able to stand out. Minnesota was close to winning the Big Ten West last year. In my opinion, they should have won the Big Ten West, but they didn't. And of course, being that they didn't win the Big Ten West, that's just going to add to the criticism of head coach PJ Fleck. But I still think he is a solid college coach. And with that said, what do you expect for Minnesota? They're not world beaters. This has not been a world beaters program for generations. But with that said, I think Minnesota is more than capable of competing in the Big Ten West. They've got to break in a new quarterback after longtime quarterback Tanner Morgan has moved on. Also, how do you replace Muhammad Ibrahim at running back? He's been the bread and butter of this offense for the last several years. One thing that could help Minnesota, they were ninth in the nation last year in total defense, and I think that defense is going to be important once again. Stepping out of conference on the 16th of September to travel to take on a good North Carolina team. But then, they've got a tough slate overall. They're home for Michigan this year in October. They travel to Iowa City to take on Iowa. They're home for Michigan State. They host Illinois. They're at Ohio State in September. And of course, they finish at home versus Wisconsin. So that's a very telling schedule right here for the Golden Gophers. Speaking of defense, you think about what the Iowa Hawkeyes have been under Kirk Ferentz, consistently one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. But their issue has been on offense as Kirk Ferentz has been unable to get those quality skill players, especially quarterbacks, to come to Iowa City. Now you get the former Michigan quarterback, Cade McNamara, who is transferred there, and he's joining an Iowa offense that was 130th out of 131 teams last year in the nation in total offense. You think about the tight end position; it's always been a staple for Iowa under Kurt Ferentz, and I think Luke Lachey will add to that this year. Also, keep an eye out for sophomore running back Caleb Johnson because now at the quarterback position has improved from last year. That should open him up a little bit more. But Iowa's bread is going to continue to be buttered on defense. Cornerback Cooper DeJean, Big Ten Player of the Year candidate. You got to keep an eye on him for the Thorpe Award as well. 8 seniors starting defensively for the Hawkeyes, as this was a squad that was second in the nation in defense a year ago. And I think they once again have that opportunity to be very special. You look at the Illini under head coach Brett Bielema, and he's doing just what he was brought to Champaign for. He's not only making Illinois a contender in the Big Ten West, he's also making them a legit team. And I say that from the standpoint that the Illini had a very good opportunity to win the Big Ten West and get to the championship game last year before things unraveled. And this Illinois team, they are feisty and they're scrappy, and that's just like the teams that Brett Bielema had when, his first time around in the Big Ten when he was a head coach at Wisconsin. You get the Ole Miss transfer at quarterback and Luke Altmaier taking over right now. But of course, the big thing is they got to replace Chase Brown at running back. That's where Reggie Love is going to get his fair share of carries. And I think, regardless of who the running back is for Illinois, and this is no disrespect to Chase Brown, but Brett Bielema is another one of those guys. It's all about the offensive line, and it's all about dictating things at the line of scrimmage. And Illinois is definitely going to run the football. One of the top defenses last year. They've got to replace some guys on defense, but I think Illinois is once again going to be a solid team. A statement opportunity for them on the 16th of September when they host Penn State. That's a big game for Illinois right there. They're at Purdue on September 30th. And if you remember last year, Purdue came to Illinois and beat the Illini. And that was a big reason why the Fighting Illini did not win the Big Ten West. They're at Maryland in October. And like I talked about before, with Maryland being a team that a lot of teams don't want to face, especially in College Park, that right there is definitely a game to watch. Always you circle the Wisconsin game because, of course, Brett Bielema once in his previous life coaching at Wisconsin, and then, of course, the Minnesota game, and then the Iowa game on the 18th of November, which could come down to determining who wins the Big Ten West. For Nebraska, obviously, the folks in Lincoln don't want to hear or don't want to continue to hear the term rebuilding, but that's what they're doing right now. At first, it seemed like a storybook ending. You bring back your former starting quarterback in Scott Frost, who was the starting quarterback in your last national championship season of 97, and he was expected to be the guy to turn the program around. And unfortunately, that was not the case. He got fired last year. And now Nebraska has put their faith in Matt Rule. And Matt Rule has a reputation of turning around programs. He did it at Temple and he did it at Baylor. And now the folks in Lincoln are hopeful that he can do it once again for the Cornhuskers. He's got to start from ground one or level one, any way you want to refer to it as far as fixing things. And I think this is going to be a transition year for the Cornhuskers. It's going to be a transition year, obviously, for Matt Rule. And I think even though that the wins might not be there this year for Nebraska, I do believe that as the season progresses, they are going to be a better team. And Matt Rule and his program are going to continue to grow. It's just going to take some time. For Purdue, obviously, this is a transition year for them. Jeff Brom was, developing a solid program in West Lafayette, but he got an offer that he could not refuse when he took over at Louisville because obviously that's his alma mater. But now Purdue has turned to Ryan Walters to be their next head football coach. No previous head coach experience, but he's familiar with life in the Big Ten as he spent the last 2 years as the defensive coordinator for Illinois. But, he's got some work to do with this team. He's bringing in former Texas quarterback Hudson Card to be the signal caller for him. And you've also got sophomore running back Devin Maccabee, who averaged close to 5 yards per carry last year. It's going to be one of those things. It's a transition from Brom to Walters for Purdue. So let's see how things go for the Boilermakers. For Northwestern, What can you say? Obviously, they were coming into the season looking to improve. After a tumultuous 2022, they won their first game of the season in Ireland against Nebraska. And after that, it was downhill. Of course, no more Pat Fitzgerald after so many years as the head coach of the Wildcats, as this is a program that's probably going to take it on the chin once again this year. And then finally, you have Wisconsin. And this is another program that's in transition. Wisconsin began last year ranked in the top 25. They were expected to do some good things in the Big Ten, but it just never came to fruition. We saw Paul Christ be relieved of his duties as head coach last year. And then, as Wisconsin was searching for a new head coach, they decided to go with former Cincinnati head coach Luke Fickell, who knows all about winning in the Big Ten Conference, as he once upon a time played at the Ohio State University. But nonetheless, what Fickle inherits with this Wisconsin team. You have junior running back Braylon Allen, and he had a down year last year after a tremendous freshman campaign in Madison. A lot of that had to do with the coaching change and just things just never came together for Wisconsin at all last year. But, I think this Wisconsin team is going to continue to, rely on the legs of Braylon Allen to kind of dictate things. You've got Tanner Mordecai at quarterback now. And of course, he has spent time previously collegiately at both Oklahoma and SMU. One player to keep an eye on is going to be inside linebacker Jordan Turner. And if you've watched Wisconsin over the last 20 years or so, it's all about their linebacker play. So I want to see what Wisconsin does early this season, because on the 9th of September, they're traveling to Pullman to take on Washington State. And remember, Washington State came into Madison last year and they ran the football up and down the field on the Badgers. And that was the game that got Paul Christ out of there. So let's see how these Badgers look under Luke Fickle when they make that trip west. Always a big game. Wisconsin and Iowa. Wisconsin will host Iowa this year on the 14th of October. They're at Illinois on the 21st, and then they finish the regular season on November 25th at Minnesota. Nonetheless, I think the Big Ten West this year, to me, is going to come down to Iowa and Illinois. But I'm going to give Iowa the advantage here. I think that them getting McNamara from Michigan at quarterback is definitely going to help. You think about the way that the Hawkeyes can play D, and I think that is going to be the edge right there. In the East, I think just like last year, just like the last couple of years, rather, this is what the Big Ten was hoping for, partially what the Big Ten hoped for when they expanded their league, is that Michigan Ohio State game at the end of the season, deciding something going into conference championship weekend. Of course, when the Big Ten did originally expand to 12 teams, and then of course 14 teams at 12 teams, it was the leaders and legends division. Ohio State and Michigan were in separate divisions with the hope that they could meet in a Big Ten championship game. That never happened due to the fact that Michigan at that point fell on hard times. But of course, in recent years, we've seen this game mean something again like it has in the past. And typically, you want to see Michigan and Ohio State in the top five when they face each other. It's happened about the last 3 or 4 years. And of course, the last 2 years, the Wolverines got the best of the Buckeyes. Once again, just like last year, I do think when they take the field in late November, both of them are going to be undefeated. Both of them will have an opportunity, obviously, at the playoff. And I think even the loser might still have an opportunity to get to the playoff, depending on how things play out. But nonetheless, I do think Michigan finds a way to get past Ohio State. I think Michigan once again wins the Big Ten, and I think Michigan will once again be playoff bound. This, to me, as many teams as you have in the Big Ten, I think it's a two-team race right now. Michigan and Ohio State are just a cut above everybody else. And I think as this season progresses, we are going to find that out firsthand. Nonetheless, I think, they have both teams. I think they have the best players in this conference. Like I said before, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to rack up on the individual awards this year. He's also, right around the bend from having a big payday in the National Football League. And just like I said yesterday, the start of the college football season is right around the corner. We are in for a litany of fun and excitement, and look no further than the Big Ten to provide plenty of it. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'd be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.